What up, guys? Welcome to this episode of Santa Cruz Medicinals Radio. We're back with Dr. J. We're back with Evan. And this episode is going to be something that helps you so much, because what we're going to do is we're going to jump right into supplements that can help you, protocols you can use. This is all going to be for you, stuff that you can do today if you want and take action on your health. So we're going to start right off the bat with magnesium. Magnesium is a supplement I've been selling for a long time. My life definitely changed when I started taking magnesium. What are some of the different forms of magnesium? Why do you take magnesium? What does it do in the body?
Excellent question. So first off, out of the gate, most people, I'd say half the population, there's some data by CDC showing half the population is low in magnesium. They're totally deficient, right? And so unless you're eating good, healthy, leafy green vegetables that are organic, 'cause remember the soil quality dictates the nutrients in your vegetables. So if you're eating conventional produce, even though you're eating whole foods, you still may not have that same nutrient quality. So that's a big component. So organic vegetables. So with magnesium, it's going to have lots of impact on sedation, on relaxation. And that's important because if you're stressed, you want to be able to down tune and get that parasympathetic going. Magnesium is also going to play a large role in the Krebs cycle. If you look at how the Krebs cycle or citric acid cycle rolls, right? You have fumarate, malate, succinate, alpha keto, different compounds. And what comes in there is B vitamins, amino acids, and you're going to see magnesium.
Gotcha.
Right. And so if you're consuming a lot of processed food that's like just sugary, you're going to actually deplete B vitamins and deplete magnesium because it requires those nutrients to run your Krebs cycle, right? Your Krebs cycle, each time it churns around, it pumps out 3 NADHs and 1 FADH2. And so then it pumps around twice for every bit of glucose or acetyl-CoA goes in. So you get 6 NADH2 or 6 NADH and then 2 FADH2, right? So magnesium plays a big role in that generation there because those hydrogens from those compounds dump into the electron transport chain where you generate 32 to 33 ATP. So
And
really
is that why you would probably say people say stress depletes magnesium?
Yes.
And is that one
And
of the
B
reasons?
vitamins.
And B vitamins. And then so obviously we can get some through our diet, stuff like dark
Yes.
chocolate, leafy greens,
Yep.
some good high quality dairy products if you tolerate them. can get you
Organs
some.
too.
But I've done the chronometer and looked into it, and I'm still sometimes 200 to 300 milligrams short. I'm obsessed with my diet.
And magnesium?
Yeah, so I'm still supplementing with magnesium glycinate.
So I can go into the types. So
Yeah.
we have some of your cheaper types, magnesium citrate, which is decent. It's going to be a cheaper form. Like you have ones like Natural Calm that are out there, or you have cheaper ones like magnesium oxide, better for bowel motility. Citrate will get into your bloodstream.
Those give my gut issues, man.
Yeah,
personally.
Again, if you have good, healthy gut function, you don't need it, right? But if you have motility issues, it can help because I look at it as having good, healthy BMs helps you detoxify, right? And so you want to fix the root cause, but that's a good palliative thing while you're fixing the microbiome,
laxative, yeah.
acid enzyme balance. That's a good thing in between, but it's a stopgap. Then you have better quality ones that are going to be better absorbed. That's your malate. Malate plugs really well into the Krebs cycle. Glycinate, same amino acid as collagen, right? So magnesium and glycine, really good for absorption. You need less of that, like 300 to 400 milligrams is the top dose. You'll need higher on the citrate, a half a gram to a gram. And then you're going to have magnesium aspartate, which is kind of in that malate, really well absorbed. And then you start going into autism or a lot of brain inflammation issues, like a lot of brain fog, magnesium threonate. That crosses the blood-brain barrier better. And Russell Blaylock, famous neurosurgeon, he said he started doing craniotomies on his patient. He started putting them on magnesium for their brain health. And he was comparing with his other doctors, and they were having significant healing time on their brain surgery with magnesium. So we'll see it on an organic acid test. Evan can see, but quinolinic acid is a brain inflammatory compound. And when they see that high, they recommend magnesium to quench that brain inflammation.
Gotcha.
So threonate's good.
Wow. And I know threonate was invented by MIT researchers, and threonate is a bit more expensive, guys.
Yes,
if
it
you're
is.
wondering why a lot of supplement companies don't use threonate, or if they have threonate, you're like, wow, this seems very expensive. It just is bulk. I know that, and you know that as somebody who makes supplements. It's just expensive.
You can start off with citrate, it's cheaper, but if you have the extra dough, go with either a malate or a glycinate. It's
Yeah,
a good
absolutely.
one.
That's I'm a big fan of those for sure. They're affordable. So how much magnesium are you taking? When do you like to use magnesium, and why?
Yeah, I love the threonate at night. So for sleep, what's weird though? Some people say they get insomnia from it, which I don't understand. I don't know if the threonate somehow waking up the brain or what, but I like to take it at night. So threonate at night, it's gonna be 200 to 400 milligrams. A glycinate, what do you put in here? How much?
Yeah, we have magnesium glycinate. So what we did with this one is we have 166 milligrams of magnesium glycinate. So I like to actually take 3 capsules, and then we have a little touch of potassium. We know that we have that magnesium potassium balance.
Yep.
And when making a supplement, you see all these additives and supplements because they need to fill out the capsule. They need something else in there. And so instead of putting something like a magnesium stearate or oxide in there, which I just didn't want to do, or filling it with a rice flour, which I think is totally fine, we were just like, could we just throw a little touch of potassium in there?
Yeah.
So that's why I went with that for the magnesium potassium
good.
balance.
The malate, like half a gram. And malate's amazing for athletes as well. So he's mentioning with the Krebs cycle supporting the mitochondria. So if you're someone with chronic fatigue, if you're an athlete, if you're going to go do practice jujitsu, or maybe you're going to go out surfing, like I'm going to hit the malate for those guys. We notice a big difference with athletes. They just feel better. They perform longer. So they're not going to tire out as easily. And of course, if you're taking the electrolytes, you're going to get some of that as well. If you have it all balanced, you're going to feel fine. But people that are having like post-exertional malaise, this has been huge since the virus. We've seen people that they simply can't perform at the level they used to. They're like, hey, I used to be able to do this amount of training. Now it's cut in half. We find if we add malate, we also like to add other stuff to the mitochondria as well. We're going to like to add in probably some CoQ10, some PQQ for what's called mitochondrial biogenesis. We're actually making new mitochondria. The malate fits right into that blend. And then for the kids too, like a lot of kids, actually, I think it's probably the EPA, maybe the FDA, maybe all of them. They've actually published data on the nutrition level in vegetables and fruits, and they compared it to 1920, and it is abysmal. I want to say it's something like an 80% across the board, 80% reduction in vitamin C, magnesium, potassium. It's absolutely terrible. And the problem is people think, okay, if I'm just eating organic veggies and fruit, I'm getting enough. But the problem is all that means is hopefully they didn't use synthetic pesticides and chemicals. But organic does not equal necessarily nutrient density.
True.
On average, it is more nutrient dense. You're going to get more from that organic food. But unfortunately, I mean, Dr. J and I, we've run thousands of labs through organic acids. It's very rare to find someone that has sufficient levels of nutrients, even people that are eating whole food. So I think
sure. I mean, even somebody like me, I'm obsessed with my diet, and like, especially with something like magnesium, it's one of my top 5 supplements for people. And as we just talked about here, it's going to help with that Krebs cycle. You're going to start to feel better overall. So
also, you could put it in the comments real quick, but there's a document that came out in the 1940s. There was a Senate meeting. It was like the Senate document 247. It could be, the number could be off a little bit, but put it in the comments. It was a document looking at the quality of our soil and the nutrition coming from our plants. In the 1940s, they already saw nutrient deficiencies in the food, meaning they were comparing it from decades earlier, and they were seeing big drops in the nutrients. And that was in the 40s, essentially before pesticides basically came out in the 50s, right? It was a byproduct of the post-World War II bombing industry, right? Because all the NPK fertilizer to make the bombs, right? That became the raw material. So that document came out in the 40s. So we know if that was a problem in the 40s, where's that today?
Yeah, totally. So the next supplement I want to talk to you guys about is vitamin D. Vitamin D, definitely in my top 5 supplements. We made one with organic olive oil, 5,000 IUs of vitamin D. Why is it something that you've recommended to people? Why is it so important?
So vitamin D is going to modulate your immune system. So a large percent of the population have autoimmune conditions where your immune system is actually attacking whether your thyroid in Hashimoto's, or your beta cells in your pancreas for type 1 diabetes, or for your myelin in your nerves in MS, or the substantia nigra of your midbrain in Parkinson's. And so it's going to modulate your T regulatory cells, which help that Th1, Th2 immune balance. That's powerful. Also, high levels of it, it produces this antimicrobial peptide called cathelicidin, so very antibacterial. So if you're worried about either bacterial issues or even viral issues, because vitamin D upregulates those natural killer cells. That's the first line of defense. You have your Navy SEALs or your kind of, your special forces that go in to attack the bug initially, right? You get this macrophage presenting cell, and then you have the antibodies come second, right? So it gets all that upregulated. So I think for the average person, shoot for at least 50. If it's autoimmunity, 70 to 90 is a good starting point.
For your vitamin D levels in a lab test is what we're
Yeah, and you can start with 5,000 IUs a day and then see where you're sitting, or just come out with 10 to 20,000 for a month and then test it and see where you're at.
And so people always say stuff like, oh, well, if I just went out in the sun in my jeans and a t-shirt for a little bit, people say, I'm getting my vitamin D. Oh, I got my vitamin D today. I walked in the sun. What's going on there? Are they really upping their vitamin D levels by a 15-minute walk in the sun?
I mean, they've done studies here in San Diego where people have beach exposure and there was not enough to get the average person into that saturation level. Plus, do you shower afterwards, because you have to absorb that cholesterol on your skin. And, I would say it depends on how dark your skin is, right? If you already have a dark tan, right, it's going to be harder for you to make that vitamin D. Yeah. Right. You're more white, more pale, more fair. You're going to have a better chance. So it just depends upon your skin. So if you're darker, you definitely need to have oral vitamin D. You will not make enough.
And then, Evan, you've run a lot of lab work on families, on kids. Are you seeing kids come in vitamin D deficient commonly?
So the young kids, we won't push them for blood just because it's so traumatic.
Oh
to
my
try
God,
to
the
get,
blood test.
Oh,
yeah, to try to get 3, 4, 5, 6 year old. But I do see a lot of teenagers, and
Yes.
they're okay with doing blood. Man, 99 out of 100 of these guys they're completely deficient. I mean, we've seen it in the 20s, and the problem is too, a lot of people before they come to us, they've already been to 5, 10, 15 different doctors, practitioners, and specialists. Maybe they even went to a naturopath, right? So I do want to make one little point here on this vitamin D is that you could go to a naturopath and they'll go, okay, vitamin D is low. We're going to give you 5,000 IU. See you later. Have a good day. But the problem is if they're not addressing the gut piece as well, the gut dysbiosis piece as well, how much are you absorbing from that?
Yeah.
I've seen people where on their daily list of supplements they bring to us, they've been taking 5,000 and they're still low. I'm like, well, what the hell's going on?
There's also an interplay with vitamin D and magnesium, right? There's interplay
Yeah.
with vitamin D and other nutrients, right? That
'Cause vitamin D, it's also going to increase your body's ability to absorb phosphorus from protein and also calcium. And calcium and magnesium have a natural relationship. And even if you can't get enough from your sun and you're having to take it orally, you should still try to get 15 minutes from the sun in the morning. Even if you know that's not going to be enough, you're like, well, I'll get up in vitamin D. You should still try.
Yeah, no, I do
Just get a
both.
little bit of pinkness, and even just, look on your iPhone and just try to get into that like UV index 1 or 2 or even 3. That's going to be fine on your skin.
Now, there's an app too. There's several apps, but there was one I used years ago called D-Minder.
D-Minder, yep.
But it was based on latitude. So, like, if you were out too early, though, you're not actually going to synthesize any. You had to wait until that vitamin D window opened up, which, depending on your latitude, it could be 10 a.m. to maybe 2 p.m. And then certain parts of the year, if you're north of Atlanta, Georgia, basically after November, it's impossible. You can stay outside all day naked in North Dakota, even if it's sunny. You're not generating any vitamin D due to the angle of the sun coming in through the atmosphere. And so supplementation for me, people ask this all the time. They're like, do I have to take supplements forever? And my counter question is, well, do you want to survive or thrive?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And they go, I want to thrive. And I go, okay, well, you live XYZ. You're not ever going to get to the level you need to get to. Therefore, you are going to have more opportunistic bacterial overgrowth because of this low D, not to mention with viral infections. Justin and I, we did a great podcast on this a couple years ago. People that had a level above 30 were not dying at all. People below 30, those are the critically ill people. So there's a massive impact on inflammatory cytokines, keeping that under control as well. So for brain health, for gut health, for immune health, for viral, I mean, it's an incredible tool and it's cheap.
That's the thing. That's
so
what I was
cheap.
just about to say, guys. We sell the vitamin D for $14, and it's like it's a 2-month supply if you're taking 5,000 IUs per day. And you know what? If you're really on a budget, go get a thing with a bunch of soybean oil in there. There's vitamin D. They'll give you vitamin D for free almost at some of these places. It's like it's extremely affordable. So moving on to another supplement.
I want to hit one thing too.
Tell me.
Outside of just the vitamin D and the sunlight, like we talked about, cookie situation yesterday with circadian rhythm. If you're having a hard time getting to bed on time, you could staying up too late. Just that vitamin D, that UVB light, UVA light hitting your pineal gland, hitting your eyes is a good cortisol circadian rhythm reset.
Yes.
It really gets that biological clock ready. So then 12, 14, 16 hours later, you're ready to go to sleep at a much better time. And if you can do it, take off your socks, put your feet on the grass or the concrete and get that grounding in while you do it to reset your circadian rhythm.
100%. It's one of the easiest things to do. When I wake up, boom, the shades come up, and I go outside, and I'm getting light into my eyes. And we just got back from waking up Cookie King at his hotel. He was asleep, and we go in there, and it's dark. And that's the first thing I do is start opening up the shades there, and I'm yelling, "It's 11 a.m. It's 11 a.m. Why is it so dark in here?" Because, of course, you're not going to be tired later when your body hasn't actually gotten any of these neurochemicals in and ramped anything up to show you need to be awake until like 1 p.m. or whatever it is. So that's a problem. Speaking of some of that regulation, ashwagandha.
Yes.
So ashwagandha has gone viral lately, like extremely viral lately, and everybody's using ashwagandha. There's obviously the study showing that it can increase testosterone through lowering cortisol,
15%,
basically.
yep.
And that's amazing. So people started taking it, and unfortunately, people started using it probably in a wrong way. I know there's different ways to use ashwagandha, but many people just started hearing ashwagandha increases testosterone. I think they get the bottle of ashwagandha, they take it a few times, they feel amazing because we all know what it feels like when you take this stuff, and they go, this is it, I'm going to take a bunch of this. They up their dose, they start to really probably lower their cortisol. So can you elaborate on what ashwagandha is, how it works, when to take it, and what it does?
So there's data on ashwagandha that's conflicting, where it shows that it definitely reduces high cortisol, but there's also some modulation where it can impact lower cortisol too. Now, when I run a cortisol rhythm test, if we see very low cortisol throughout the day, Like there may be some benefits, on the HPA axis, kind of resetting the brain feedback loop, the hypothalamus pituitary talking to the adrenals. But if it's chronically low, we're going to give B vitamins. We're going to give adrenal glandular tissue. We're going to give licorice extract, not DGL licorice, not deglycerized, but actual licorice, because it blocks this 11 beta steroid dehydrogenase 2 enzyme that breaks down cortisol. So when you give licorice, it's like plugging the drain up and allowing the cortisol to accumulate. We'll also give things like ginseng when it's lower as well. And then a lot of times B vitamins. A lot of these people who have the adrenal issues, they've had a processed diet for a while. What's in that? A lot of synthetic crummy B vitamins. 70% of the population has MTHFR, so we're definitely giving LMTHF folate or calcium folate or methylated B12 or P5P B6. So we're giving these nutrients.
Let's elaborate on that a little bit. So when we see these energy drinks that are being sold, cereals that are being sold, and they have all these vitamins in them. So we see cyanocobalamin, we see all these vitamins. If you pick up any energy drink, it'll be like, has a bunch of B12, cyanocobalamin. What's going on with those forms of B vitamins that they're putting in there? Vitamin A, acetate, all these synthetic forms.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, they are just cheaper forms of B12. I mean, cyanocobalamin, the only thing that's good for is actually if you're being poisoned with cyanide, that's actually the antidote, right? Okay. So if you're suspected of being poisoned, take it for that. But if not, you want an MTHF or a methyl B12, is really good. Or you can do an adenosine, which is or hydroxyl plugs more into the Krebs cycle. So adenosine, hydroxyl, or just a good methyl. And methyl groups are just carbon with 3 hydrogens. Gotcha. And every process, detoxification, neurotransmitters, everything involves that carbon and 3 hydrogens.
And those are strong too. So for people that are like, hey, I've taken B12 and I don't feel it, if you throw in the adeno or the hydroxy, man, it is like jet fuel to the body.
And there are some good tricobalamin products out there that have all 3. Yeah. Or if you're really sensitive, like we'll run like an organic acid. We'll look at methylmalonic acid, or we'll look at figlu, 4-aminoglutamate. And these will tell us how you're doing kind of at the cellular level with that nutrient. That's the gold standard, because B12 is needed to take methylmalonic acid into succinic acid. And so when we see methylmalonic acid high, that means it's not converting downstream, and that B12 is the rate limiting nutrient to bring it down to succinic acid.
Hey, this could be a little bit of a tangent, but why don't you hit on blood levels of B12 versus organic acids levels? Because I get asked that all the time. Hey, B12 looks like this on blood. Okay. Why are you telling me this here on the oat?
All right, so great question. So when we look at, there's 4 ways to look at B12 deficiency. Your conventional medical doctor will run a serum B12. If you're taking B12 and you've taken it in the last day or so, you're going to be on the higher side. That's okay. That's normal, all right? Not a big deal. Like if you're at 1,200, 1,400, not a big deal. Next thing is if you're in that bottom half, let's say 600, 700 below, you're probably low in B12, okay? The next marker you can look at to kind of juxtapose it is homocysteine. Homocysteine is an inflammatory metabolite. You can go look at the book by the researcher at Harvard called Kilmer McCulley. He was literally laughed out of Harvard because he was the one that found the B12 folate link to high levels of homocysteine. So you have essentially methionine gets converted to cysteine, and this in-between compound is called homocysteine. It requires B12, B6, and even NAC to help that conversion to go from methionine to cysteine, and cysteine goes to glutathione. And that nutrient, it helps with dopamine and your catecholamines too. And that gets stuck in this inflammatory middle ground, right? This no man's land without those B vitamins.
Interesting. Okay. And so...
And 70% of the population has this MTHFR enzyme deficiency, which is what converts folic acid into activated folate. And so if you're taking the junkier B vitamins, odds are you're one of the 70% that cannot convert and activate that. And that folic acid can be this kind of cancer-causing metabolite if we can't convert it. So that's going to be in your processed grains, your Mountain Dew, your sodas. So that's why that's a big deal if you're eating a lot of processed food.
Gotcha. And so if somebody is just like, oh, I feel stressed out, should they take ashwagandha, or how? And I know that's a vague question without lab testing to really confirm what's going on there, but what do you give ashwagandha to people for, and how do you use it?
I like it as a good multitasker, because if you look at the work of Stephen Buhner, he passed last year, but he was a great Lyme literate herbalist, and he had all kinds of herbs in kind of his in his tool belt, and he loved ashwagandha for long-term immune use. So I do like it, 1 gram to 2 grams a day. Where it can become a little contraindicated, we put someone on an autoimmune diet if they start to have problems with alpha-solanine or nightshades, right? Tomatoes, potatoes, eggplants, peppers. Then I'm like, ooh, maybe ashwagandha could be a no-no, because that is an alpha-solanine nightshade. It's in that nightshade family. So that's where it's a little bit, contraindicated. Sure. And so if they're really, really, really low, they may need more upper supporting herbs, or even glandulars, or even actual dopamine amino acids as well in the bees. So it just depends where they're at. It may be good, but not the best unless we have the other things there too.
And can ashwagandha increase testosterone in
Yes,
your opinion?
15%, 15%. Again, like when it comes to testosterone, it's like, okay, you're taking ashwagandha, but your insulin's still sky high. It's like, well, that's going to upregulate aromatase, and that's going to go downstream. So there's a lot of things. If we're going to hit if we're going to hit testosterone, we're bumping up saw palmetto as well, because that's an alpha reductase inhibitor. We can bump up testosterone with that. We're adding in dopamine support. That's going to increase it. We're adding in maybe some tribulus to help with FSH signaling from the pituitary. So we're hitting a lot of things. And like, are you breaking down your protein? Like if you want your T to get up, you probably need 3/4 to 1 gram per pound of body weight.
Yeah,
And you need some resistance training. And if you're busy at work, just get a kettlebell.
Yeah,
Just do 4 or 5 swings, 15 reps a day. Just get that going, you know?
No,
It's full body.
totally. So now I want to get into some of the supplements that'll help people deal with the bullshit in life.
Yeah.
What I mean is we live in a toxic world.
Yep.
We're inhaling brake dust. We are exposed to microplastics. There's phthalates. It is what it is. We all live semi-normal lives. N-acetylcysteine is one I want to cover. DIM, calcium D-glucarate, just those sort of supplements that I put in the category of helping me deal with the bullshit. So let's dive into those.
NAC is cost effective because it's going to be a precursor to glutathione. So we have a toxic world. Glutathiones are a master antioxidant the liver makes to help detoxify. Okay, we can definitely add in glutathione too. Just there's a couple, it's a little more expensive, but it also can create a little bit of a Herxheimer. So you want to be working with a clinician if you're adding that in. But NAC is great. Plus, NAC can cross the blood-brain barrier and convert to glutathione. So if you have metals or mold issues in the brain, it's going to at least cross and convert. Evan can speak more to that later. You know, we'll talk about binders and other things, but that's going to be powerful as well. So getting the NAC in there is kind of a first starting point for sure.
Let's hit why though. Why?
Yeah.
Why the heck? Like, what are the mechanisms of it? Well, one of them, we were talking last night about NAC and the sinuses, and how if you take too much NAC, you'll notice it'll dry out your sinuses.
Membranes,
So people that are having like a chronic sinus infection or any sort of, I would say if you've known that you've had candida or mold, NAC is a must. And you mentioned the Herxheimer reaction. So just in case his audience is new to that Herxheimer, what he's describing there is that glutathione is a provoking agent, meaning it's going to mobilize, meaning it's going to move around potentially heavy metals, pesticides, mycotoxins. And so we experiment on ourselves all the time. I took a lot of glutathione one time to see what would happen, and I was messed up for a couple of days. Like, it definitely pushes things out, whereas NAC is much more gentle. And because of that conversion process that's going to happen, you have this sort of internal regulatory process, whereas glutathione, you're giving it straight. It's almost more like an IV nutrient. Like, it's going to hit hard.
It's so fascinating to hear you guys say that, because this is why it's really important to be dialed in with this stuff. Because people hear glutathione good. Glutathione, master antioxidant, glutathione good. Now people are going and getting IVs of glutathione.
It's strong.
Like very strong amounts. And you're saying that can basically start to mobilize some of those things that they are trying to detoxify. But if you're just mobilizing them in the body without effective methods to really bind and get them out, or an actual program, they might feel like shit.
Yeah, and this is not gonna, I don't want to come across as like fear mongering here, but I have seen clients who've gone to specialty detoxification clinics where one of their main mechanisms of healing is using very high dose IV glutathione.
Yeah.
And I've seen people crash and burn. I've seen people end up with almost like paralysis-like symptoms in their legs, like numbness and tingling, major vertigo problems from glutathione, which is just moving those toxins around. Whereas NAC, you don't really have that problem. Also, there's some cool data on NAC and gray hair. So to preserve your natural hair color, NAC is amazing for that as well. So if you're hitting 30, you saw the first gray, you could take your NAC for that. And I did want to comment on the adaptogens real quick, just because I didn't get to speak much on the ashwagandha, which is, I like to stack it with other adaptogenic herbs.
Too,
So you could put ashwagandha into the category of adaptogens. And what Dr. J hit is very important, which is that you could take someone, even with no lab data, I'm still okay with somebody taking ashwagandha right out of the gate. But what I'll do is I'll kind of tweak what we stack that with based on their symptoms. So if we were to use cookie, for example, we're seeing poor motivation. We're seeing issues with focus and concentration. We're seeing issues with drive, almost a flatness. I mean, he called it a deep depression sometimes, where, he's questioning, like, what is his purpose and all that. Well, that's where I would love to stack in some rhodiola. Now, there are some tricky cases. Gets a little tricky where if you had bipolar, certain types of bipolar, rhodiola could trigger it and make it a little bit worse. However, in general, rhodiola saved my life when I was like 21. Stacking it with ashwagandha. So ashwagandha is going to keep you calm. So you can have, like, just so people understand, what is an adaptogen doing? If you have a plate full of stress in front of you, you're not going to feel that plate's full. So you can look at it and you can go, oh my God, there's a lot on my plate, but actually it's not frazzling me. I'm not having burnout. I'm not having panic attacks. And then if you stack the rhodiola on top of that, now you've got the anti-fatigue. You've got the antidepressant effect. You look up exercise, PubMed, rhodiola, it's incredible what it does for exercise, increasing oxygenation. They call it the golden root. And most of these are roots. So ashwagandha, we're using the root. Rhodiola, we're using the root. Some of these other adaptogens could be leaves, but these are 2 roots that stacked could change your life for anxiety, depression, chronic fatigue.
Now, timing wise, so a lot of people have said they started taking ashwagandha and they felt numb, like they, were just like numb to everything. I know you guys don't like to make these general statements, but for most people, would you say ashwagandha a bit later in the day rather than first thing, waking up? That's kind of what I tell people. Is I personally like to take it in the evening or afternoon. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, well said. That's exactly what I would do. I would do, your half a gram or somewhere in that ballpark of ashwagandha in the evening, maybe 7, 8 p.m. to help you just dial in rather than having to use alcohol to try to get yourself calm and quiet.
Yeah.
And then I would do the rhodiola. I would say maybe 1 or 2 p.m. cutoff for that.
Pre-workout.
Yeah, maybe like 8 a.m. to noon. Hopefully you're up and you're out of bed and you're ready to try to like get your day going by then. If you're one of those guys, in college for when I went to business school, I was working 3rd shift at UPS, and so I would take rhodiola at 10 p.m.
Yeah.
But I needed to lift heavy shit all night until 5 a.m. Like I was using my body physically, and I was one of the few guys in the summer who did not crash and burn. You're in these warehouses that there's no air conditioning. There's even great benefits to how you handle the heat. So if you're someone that's like, I can't even tolerate the heat, adaptogens can actually help you tolerate heat and cold conditions as well. So if you're out in the surf, you're in cold water, you're going to adapt better to the water fluctuations simply by having these adaptogens in your bloodstream. So it's an incredible tool, not just for the anxiety, depression piece, but also the mental piece and how your hypothalamus, how your immune system is responding to a threat. And that threat could be a bad text message. It could be a breakup. It could be a full plate of stress and obligations. It could be airline travel. We're going to be on planes. Adaptogens are going to help us adapt to that flight.
Mm-hmm.
Radiation as well. Some of the adaptogens have anti-radioprotective effects as well.
Yeah, and at like a base level, like your body is going through stress. There are compounds you can take that help you adapt to stress, and when used properly, they help your body. This isn't that complex. I mean, to us at least. So N-acetylcysteine is one that
I want
we
to
just
just comment
talked about.
just one bit on the ashwagandha. So when you look at ashwagandha, it does well with high cortisol. So if I see extreme high cortisol, I'm using it for sure throughout the day.
Yeah.
The 2 big symptoms that I see ashwagandha work amazing on is insomnia, sleep, and anxiety. So if I have any of those 2, that's going to be a core compound. Now, if you're very low cortisol and we're giving ashwagandha in the morning and you do feel worse, then we may give it or lower the dose, and we may give something that's going to be more stimulatory, because ashwagandha is a ginseng, right? It's Indian ginseng. The transcript translation of ashwagandha means to impart the strength of the horse. Pretty cool, right?
Yeah, it's
because
so
you have different. You have Indian ginseng is ashwagandha, Peruvian ginseng is maca.
Yep.
You have American ginseng, which will be more stimulatory, or Korean red ginseng, more stimulatory. Right? And so there's a lot of different things that you can do. Also, eleuthero, that's Siberian ginseng. That's one that the Russians used in the 60s and 70s to make their super soldiers, but that does increase more DHEA, more sex hormone precursors from the adrenals. So if I see adrenal burnout, like very low DHEA, we're going to bump that up. That's going to help my perimenopausal women help with their estrogen, progesterone a little bit. It's also going to help guys make more testosterone too from the DHEA.
Here's a question.
Yeah.
A lot of people might want to know, because I've read this on Reddit. There's tons of threads about guys having anhedonia or ahedonia, like this total loss of pleasure.
Yeah, I think they're
ashwagandha.
taking ashwagandha, and honestly, I think they're just taking it in the morning in pretty high doses. I think people are taking their supplement regime, and they're taking, 2 ashwagandha pills first thing when they wake up, and they might want their cortisol to be higher. For me, like you're saying, it helps in insomnia, anxiety. For me, just naturally with what I do, I'm on my phone a bit too much, on the computer a bit too much. So if I don't take ashwagandha, I notice myself just up until about midnight, sometimes even 1 a.m., feeling the urge to go on my phone more, which is just a form of anxiety for me. And when I take ashwagandha, I'm able to just sort of melt into the evening routine, melt into bed, be able to put the phone away more. And it's just been so helpful for me. But I don't think I'd like it in the morning personally.
I have a lot of immune sensitive patients that come see me. So we don't do any supplementation the first 2 to 3 weeks unless it's just getting your diet dialed in and enzymes and acid, maybe bile. That's it. Or maybe a little bit of motility support because you're super backed up. So just getting the inflammation down calms the immune system. So now when you start adding things in for the first time, we're doing it one at a time. We're doing a titration dose to calibrate everything. So if you are sensitive, we're going to see, okay, so that's going to be your dose.
Yeah.
And then we adjust it.
Yeah, totally. So some of the supplements to help with like detoxification, microplastic exposure, phthalates, looking at DIM and CDG. These are 2 supplements that I've used for a while. What is DIM? How is it working? it's been amazing for me for skin health overall. And just when I'm traveling, and I have to drink out of some plastic water bottles, I feel like I crave the dim a bit more. Why might that be?
So just having the NAC and the glutathione will help with detoxifying, right?
Yes.
But then you have like indole 3-carbinol, which is a precursor to diindole methane, which is it's a sulfur compound. You'll get a lot of it in like your broccoli sprouts and a lot of your cruciferous vegetables. Again, but you're not going to get like if you have FODMAP issues or a lot of bloating because of that, then getting DIM or getting it at a therapeutic level, a couple hundred milligrams a day is very helpful because that will help upregulate your methylation pathways for detox. Like on the Dutch test, on page 3, it's the bottom left-hand corner. It's your 2-methoxy, 2-hydroxy estrogen metabolite pathway. And we'll see those a lot very low, which means we're not metabolizing estrogen well. And so I'll go on to page 6 where we look at the pyroglutamate, make sure glutathione's good. That's an organic acid that correlates with glutathione. And then we look at the DIM, or we may even add in calcium diglucarate as good, powerful supports there.
Nice. And now we're going to get into some supplements for focus, cognition, memory. Some of these obviously can be used pre-workout. A lot of what I've noticed, it's so funny formulating a natural pre-workout is supplements like alpha GPC. It just depends what you want to market them as. You can market it as something that's cognitive enhancing, and it also helps with musculoskeletal health. We've seen basic studies showing people taking alpha GPC had stronger bench presses after taking it. So it's obviously helping with both. But for overall cognition, if we just want to frame it like that, what do you like?
So if I have testing, right, let's say we're seeing super high levels of cortisol, right? Cortisol is going to have a major impact on the limbic centers of the brain, right? Mood, memory. So if we have lots of cortisol, we can get the cortisol down. That's going to be big. So that could be whatever. It could be theanine. It could be ashwagandha. It could be phosphorylated serine, right? It could be all those things to bring that cortisol down. If we're trying to kind of be more modulatory regarding supplements, like really bump it up, if we run organic acids and we see vanilmandelate or homovanillate off, then we're going to give more dopamine support, right? Big fan of lion's mane. A couple grams of lion's mane can be super helpful. Cold exposure. I'll jump in my cold plunge for 3 minutes. That'll be a huge help as well.
Because that's going to get more dopamine. So when you run these lab tests on people and you're seeing dopamine's a little low, you're like, hey, let's crank up the cold. Let's crank up some of these compounds that can bump up the dopamine a bit. And through that, like I guess what really talking to you guys is there's no really one solution for anybody. Everybody has something different that's going on with them. There's definitely these themes that are going on out there that you're seeing more and more of just because people are living similar lifestyles. But if somebody has low dopamine and you bump the dopamine up, they're going to feel better. If somebody has high cortisol and you bring that cortisol down a bit, they're going to function better. Conversely, if they have very low cortisol, they're just feeling sort of just like probably tired all day and just like they can't do anything. Bringing that cortisol up a little bit, which everybody's so scared of cortisol, can help.
Right.
So, yeah.
And with cortisol being low, right, why is it low? It's usually there's chronic one there's HPA axis dysfunction due to stress and inflammation. But also if the body is so inflamed, and think of cortisol as like the water in the fire hose, and we decrease that inflammation, we automatically have more water in the fire hose to use on our energy because cortisol is a glucocorticosteroid, right? Gluco meaning it pertains to blood sugar and energy, corticosteroid inflammation. So if we decrease the inflammation aspect, we have more of it for energy.
I could hit a few brain nutrients too. Actually, I think it was my second book, maybe my third book. Actually, I wrote with a publisher. They reached out, wanted me to write. It's called The Everything Guide to Nootropics. It's on Amazon. And it got moderate reviews. I mean, this was a decade ago,
Yeah.
but there wasn't much out on nootropics back then. And so you mentioned alpha GPC, which can be great. A couple things that you can do without testing, because some of these people might be watching and say, hey, testing's out of reach, or, I just can't do it. What can I do right away? You mentioned some of the aminos for the brain. So that would be like maybe tyrosine or DL-phenylalanine can help with the endorphins if you're having emotional sensitivity. I would love to throw in some Bacopa as well.
Yeah, Bacopa's cool.
Bacopa's great.
Go-to
Cola is incredible. And oftentimes what we'll do is we'll add a little bit of natural blood thinners to that because we're going to try to help the microcirculation in the brain. So we like to use ginkgo. Ginkgo is incredible. I found a fossil on my old property one time of ginkgo leaves. I mean, this is a tree that's been around for 300 million years.
Yeah.
I mean, ginkgo is incredible for the brain. And then you can also get into these other compounds that are a little controversial. They're a little stronger. It's gotten much harder to access, though. You're talking the rastam family,
paracetam. I've messed around with some of those before.
And oxrastam.
New peptin, but
they're powerful.
Yeah, honestly, I think we should probably stick to the natural stuff. So there's also some really good data on wild blueberry extract. So you can eat wild blueberries. I had some, thank you so much, for the wild blueberries today in my smoothie with the beef protein. It was delicious. But you can actually use extracts of that wild blueberry, and there's some great cognitive benefits for that as well. And truthfully, I think almost I'm going to say 8 out of 10 people these days, especially guys aged 18 to 35, I'm going to say 8 out of 10 on labs are low across the board in serotonin and dopamine and endorphins. So I think using a broad spectrum amino acid could be amazing. And you're going to get some of that in like a grass-fed whey protein as well. So I'll go ahead and just like pitch a protein in there, because you could argue that's going to provide cognitive benefits by giving you the building blocks. And these are we talked about in the last podcast about vegetarians and vegans and how they're likely going to have more issues with brain fog, depression, anxiety. They're much more likely to be on a thyroid medication and an antidepressant. Well, they're missing out on those amino acids that are providing that cognitive benefit. So, and you can stack in phosphatidylcholine as well. So people that have had mold exposure, we like to add PC. Basically, I call it the oil change of the body, but you're trying to rebuild those cell membranes that get damaged. So just like we have this concept of intestinal permeability or leaky gut, we can also have leaky cells. And to rebuild those cell membranes, you have to use fatty acids like phosphatidylcholine. And so what's happening, I'm seeing clinicians, naturopaths, other people now, they're jumping onto mold. They're jumping onto detox. Detox is becoming really trendy. And a lot of people are catching on to using mitochondrial support. But what I'm finding is if people go too quickly into mitochondrial support, B vitamins and all that, they didn't use the fatty acids for the brain first, they feel worse. So when I first started playing with mitochondrial support, I was getting heart palpitations. And I was like, this is weird. What's going on? Started looking more into these leaky cell membranes damaged by toxins. Now you may say, well, is this a tangent? No, this is related to the brain. So you have this phosphatidylcholine that's going to basically rebuild the cell membrane. So you are boosting your cognitive abilities. You're reducing brain fog simply by adding in some fatty acids. And then also I saw your raw butter in the fridge. I would also want to have that in the mix as a cognitive booster as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the healthy fats just help so much.
I would say low-hanging fruit, like just coffee. Like
Yeah.
good quality coffee is going to block the adenosine receptor site.
Yeah.
That's going to have there's a lot of good benefits with coffee. Now, again, if you're sensitive, very simple. Add some fat to it. Fat of choice, MCT oil, either a C6 or a C8 fatty acid. That's going to, one, increase your ketones. Ketones are going to be an additional brain fuel that your brain can run on. Right? Dr. Veach over at Harvard found people that were insulin resistant in the brain, meaning they could not take in glucose for the brain. They could take in ketones. So you have these ketones, it time releases the caffeine, and then you throw in some amino acids like collagen, that glycine, very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. One thing we have to touch on is hair loss. Luckily, my mom's genetics Indian, so I think I'll be good there. You never know. But a lot of people are losing their hair, they're thinning, and people are doing all types of crazy stuff for this. What would you recommend for hair loss?
Great question. So there's three major kinds of hair loss, right? First is going to be some kind of an autoimmune alopecia, whether it's a scarring alopecia where the immune system is attacking the hair follicles, right? So you have to get to the root cause there. There's going to be a strong gut component. There's going to be a strong food component, maybe even an infection component. So that's more rare, probably like maybe 1%, but it's a category. Then you have your general telogen effluvium. That's going to be more your systemic hair thinning. So after like a viral infection or a major stressor in your life, emotional stress, someone passed away, it's going to be more systemic hair thinning across the hair in no particular area.
Yeah.
So you may see it like post, a virus that we had recently, people will lose hair for up to 6 months, then it will come back. That's a real thing. And then we're going to have like our typical male pattern baldness, which is like more of our androgenic alopecia. So we have testosterone, it gets converted to dihydrotestosterone via this enzyme called 5-alpha reductase. So DHT in high enough levels, or if someone is genetically prone. So it may not even have to be that high. So it's good to track your DHT over your age. So if you're in your early 20s, chart it, see where you're at. The range is like, I think 19 to like 65. See where you're at. If you see it creeping up preventatively, at least be on a good, high quality saw palmetto, 85% liquid extract, right? Low heat volatility so you don't damage the fat. But that's going to naturally block that AR enzyme, right? Similar to finasteride. But again, like if you look at the meta-analyses on saw palmetto, the only side effect is stomach discomfort. That's it. Take it with food, there's no problems at all. Virtually no side effects. So about 350 milligrams a day shows to be clinically efficacious, 20% hair regrowth. And then also, if you're watching this and you're starting to be more preventative, saw palmetto can also block the DHT receptor site on the scalp. So you can get it topically and massage it into like your Norwood areas, right? So Norwood, like 1 is you start to lose it here on the sides, and then 2 and 3, it goes back further. 4, you start to have a little vertex area here, like a monk. And then 5, 6, 7, you start to become George Costanza, essentially, right? And so you can start to massage it in these side areas here, and that's going to block that receptor site.
Gotcha.
So we can also add in, we can talk about like minoxidil, which works on those sodium potassium pumps too. And we can talk about the secret of how to make your minoxidil 400 times more efficacious as well.
Wow. How would you do that?
Great question. So minoxidil works on the sodium potassium pumps. It works on the anagen phase of hair growth, right? So anagen is essentially the growth phase. Your hair will grow for 4 to 7 years. Then we have this resting phase, right? Where we have like this telogen kind of resting phase where the hair is no longer growing, but it's resting. And then the catagen phase, it breaks off. And then we recycle into anagen. So with high levels of DHT, it shortens the anagen phase. We have less blood flow, so the hair actually starts to thin. So the first thing is hair thinning is not necessarily hair loss. It's your hair is losing body and depth. So it becomes a terminal hair is thick. It goes to a more villous hair, which is like your baby hairs that you see on your arm, right? Terminal thick. So we want to basically try to, one, get the nutrition there by getting the DHT down. That's important. All minoxidil will do is stimulate the anagen phase. But if DHT is decreasing the blood flow, then you will still have a thinning effect. So if we can get more nutrition and a longer anagen phase by working on those sodium potassium pumps, and then we get the DHT down, and we could talk about finasteride, but we can use saw palmetto, and then we can use microneedling. So if we add in minoxidil gets activated to minoxidil sulfate. Half the population does not have the enzymes to convert minoxidil to minoxidil sulfate. There's 2 ways you can do it if you don't have the enzymes. One, you can have it compounded with tretinoin, which is a vitamin A. 2, you can microneedle once a week that will activate that minoxidil sulfatase in your scalp. It'll help convert it. This Japanese study, they had minoxidil every day, minoxidil 6 days a week. The 7th day they microneedled. 400% more hair in the microneedling group.
Wow. That's crazy.
So crazy. And you're also, and how did that study even happen, right? Microneedling came about through microtrauma. There was a study of a gentleman in the 50s. He fell totally bald, fell back in a fireplace, like burnt the shit out of the back of his head. His hair started growing back. It was like, what the hell is this? And it was like, how can we create microtrauma that does not create scarring, but stimulate stem cells and blood flow where the hair can grow back?
Yeah.
And that's the mechanism.
Fascinating.
So about a 1 millimeter to 1.5 millimeter, get a really good microneedling pen, professional. If you're, get the really good heads, don't get the cheap knockoff, get the original manufacturer heads and just change it each time. Do it once a week.
Interesting.
I'm seeing a lot of stuff too on finasteride, like post-finasteride syndrome, like a lot of weird mood stuff, libido stuff. I mean, what do you say about that?
Okay, so one, it's very inflated. It's about 2% in the data, right? They've done studies where they like literally gave people finasteride and then told them nothing about the side effects, and then had one group where they literally told them about the side effects, and it was a 6 to 8x increase in reported side effects, like much higher in that group. So there's definitely a nocebo kind of effect there, right? Yeah. But so what does that mean? Does that mean finasteride's bad? For most people, it can work, but we can microdose it at 0.25 milligrams. Typical dose is 1. We can go at a much lower dose and still have 70 to 80% of the same benefit. Plus, if we go topical, the literature shows 100x less finasteride in our blood compared to an oral pill. And so first off, if you're on the fence, just do a topical saw palmetto, oral and topical. And then if you're going to start, because you want to go with a finasteride, get it liposomal, so it's less likely to go systemic. Start at 0.1 milligrams. And then gently nudge your way up. Take pictures every month or every quarter so you can monitor it. Most guys don't notice hair loss till they've lost 20 to 30% of their hairs. Average scalp's 100,000 hairs. That means 30,000 hairs have to be lost before someone sees it, before they actually realize it.
Yeah.
Let's hit the gut piece too on that. Is that cool?
Yeah.
The hair loss piece there. I mean, because I see a lot of women, and I think women actually, I think it's shifting more towards men caring about their hair as well. But I see the majority of women are like, hey, I'm like clogging the shower drain. Like we've got plumbers coming over like every 6 months to clean the shower drain. Like what the hell's going on? In almost every single case, there's some level of infection that I would assume is creating a nutrient deficiency problem. These are women that are still taking organs. They're eating grass-fed steak. Like nutritionally wise, they're doing great. So we already check off the nutrition box. But then when we see the issues in the gut with H. pylori, bacterial overgrowth, parasites, every single one of those cases, as soon as you clear the bugs, they say, hey, it's not so much that I noticed it, but my hairdresser all of a sudden is the one who saw it. And she goes, hey, you've got all this new growth back here. Yeah. What's your secret? Are you doing some magical shampoo? And most of the time the answer is no. It's simply just improving the infections. I say for a while, maybe 7-8 years ago, my hair got pretty thin. And I was like, man, what do I do? I just kept working on my gut, and all of a sudden the hair improved and it got thicker. So, and there is like a viral component as well. There's a chronic viral component, like a long haul viral component that I've seen as well. And so there could be a place for, this is a little early, but I'll just go ahead and throw it out there. There's some literature on it. There's some hypotheses out there in the medical journals, but nicotine in a patch format is helping to clear this thing out to then get people to have hair regrow. And I've seen that in several females where after just 1 week of a 7 milligram nicotine patch, all of a sudden the hair comes back like crazy. The brain fog's gone. The energy's improved. So there's still more literature coming out on that. I'm not saying go do a pouch. I'm not saying start dipping tobacco to get your hair back, but there is some great transdermal benefits I've seen with hair.
That's wild.
If we have a protein issue, right, that will show up more with the telogen effluvium type of hair loss where it's happening more systemically. So if you're in that male pattern androgenic alopecia, you'll see it more with the Norwood 1 through 7. Just Google image that, you'll see it. And so women can also fall prey too, because if they have PCOS, because they're insulin resistant and they're converting a lot of their estrogen to testosterone, that can also make them a little bit more prone as well. And also low thyroid hormone. Thyroid hormone is very important for stimulating that anagen growth phase too. Again, low thyroid will typically drive more telogen effluvium, more systemic, where more of the DHT stuff will drive that. And again, how do we know DHT? We have people that have genetic alpha reductase mutations. They don't have the enzyme. And so one thing, they actually develop micropenises because DHT is so important for like penile development. But two, there's like perfect hair as they go. So if you do not have DHT through puberty, you will have amazing hair in your 30s and 40s. That's no problem.
So one thing I want to touch on is you guys constantly run gut panels on people and gut tests. Now, what a lot of people think, and what I used to think is, oh, there's no parasites. We don't live in a third world country. This whole parasite thing is crazy. That's only in animals or dogs or something. I'm eating good food. I have clean water. I'm not getting parasites. I don't have a gut infection. And I know you guys, I mean, you're, guaranteed you're seeing people that are coming to you with issues, but I think you were saying it's like upwards of 70% of people that you're running these gut panels on do have parasites, do have issues. Let's start with one of the most common ones, because it is also very recognized in Western medicine. This isn't some weird thing we're talking about. What is H. pylori?
So H. pylori is going to be more in that bacterial camp, but about half the population have it. But the more stressed you become, the lower your hydrochloric acid comes due to like lack of parasympathetic tones, or your sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight is more activated. So parasympathetic, sympathetic, they're like a seesaw. So as one goes up, more stress, parasympathetic goes down, and vice versa. And so we need our parasympathetic to get our enzymes and acids going. And so just having lower acid and enzymes can make it fall more prey. And then obviously H. pylori lowers acid and enzymes too. And so then now we start to create nutrient and malabsorption. That's why in the literature, we'll see H. pylori correlated with mental health issues, brain fog, mood, because all the minerals, all the amino acids now get impacted by the low acid and low enzymes too. So there's an immune system thing, and also the lower the IgA, that mucosal immune membrane barrier gets lower, that's going to make your immune system more prone to attack.
Let's highlight the domino effect that happens, okay? So, he's asking about parasites, and the question is, okay, chicken or egg? Because we'll see multiple infections all the time. In fact, it's very rare to see just H. pylori or just a parasite. So this is kind of how I perceive it happening in most people. Let's say that you and your partner, you traveled to Mexico. Maybe you already had some subpathological level of H. pylori, so it's not high enough to create stomach ulcers. It's not high enough to create intestinal bleeding. You'll see esophageal cancer. You'll see some gastric cancer. You'll see scary stuff if you start looking into H. pylori too much. That's typically when the virulence factors are positive on your stool. It's going to show that it creates more damage. You'll see more inflammation. But let's just role play here. Let's say you got the H. pylori. Okay, you're just sharing cups with your partner. Maybe you're kissing. Okay, great. Now you've passed H. pylori to each other. So now you've set the stage for this lower level of stomach acid. Now you go and you eat the food truck. You get this steak kebab. Looks amazing. Unfortunately, you got a parasite from that. Well, if you had no level of H. pylori, stomach acid levels were adequate, you potentially could have killed it right at the source as soon as it hits the tummy. But instead, because of the low hydrochloric acid levels due to the bacteria you've had brewing, now the parasites can actually stay in you. So I do believe that we do get exposed to parasites, and some people do not develop infections. I think you could have bad water, bad food, and you could get over it pretty quickly. Maybe in the case of Giardia or Blastocystis hominis, you might get exposed to those. Maybe you have some diarrhea and it flushes it out. But if you've got these other things already brewing, like H. pylori, immune system is low, stomach acid levels are low, and the bugs go, ooh, this is a perfect environment for me. So now you stack bacteria, you stack parasites. Now the immune system's even weaker. what comes in after that, I typically see fungal infections. Now the candida is coming in. And conventional medicine will actually look at this. They'll look at mold as well. I mean, it's kind of controversial, but if you look up aspergilloma, you can see it on a chest x-ray. It's a literal picture of a mold ball growing in you. Wow. So I think that's the end stage.
Yeah.
But you probably had H. pylori first, lowered. Basically, think about like this, and Dr. J uses some fun analogies. We try to do analogies. I think of it as the defense shield is down. If you have H. pylori, to me, that's the first domino that falls, because now your gut is not a place that's going to kill things off. Your gut is now a place where things are going to go, oh, wait, this is a place for me to hang out. Sure. And then you're going to develop that bacterial overgrowth. It migrates north up into the small intestine. Now you're bloated. Now you're anxious. Now you're irritable. Now you've got acne. And it all started just with that one bacteria. So that's how I see it. But is it true that some people could just get a parasite in isolation? Yeah, we see it sometimes, but it's not the majority.
I kind of create two scenarios, right? You have one scenario where you get exposed to a large bolus of an infection. You go for a hike, you have some water, it's loaded with Giardia or crypto. There's a large bolus, you're going to get sick, right? Especially if your IgA isn't optimal, you will get sick with a large bolus. Or two, you have some micro level in your body, right? And then over time, stress happens, your IgA, your immune system starts to get compromised, and then it starts to become a bigger deal. It's usually those two scenarios that happen. And you'll see more on the other side, on that chronic buildup.
And you guys, you can get this, as we talked about, you can figure this out. You do a GI map test with a practitioner, you mail in your stool, they literally figure out everything that's going on in there, and then you can analyze the stuff and really look into it and knock some of the stuff down using herbs. Probably 99% of the time you can use herbs unless somebody is on death's door. But it's amazing. You take these herbs and then you feel better. It's not rocket science. I've done it.
And it's PCR based too.
Yeah, I was going to say, riff on the, I'm hearing the devil's advocate already in the comments. Like, I went to my doctor and they tested me for parasites and they didn't find anything. So can you riff on that?
So the typical like antiquated, more gastroenterological testing are going to be stain testing. So they'll take a bit of the stool, right? So one, you have to actually get the right stool where the infection is. What if you grabbed it from a part that it's not there, right? Then they have to stain it and they use a magnifying glass to see it. Well, when we use PCR technology, it's 2,000 to 3,000 times more sensitive. So we're more likely to pick up some kind of a fragment or filament of that infection. And then we can look at how many actual cells are there. So it's more quantitative versus qualitative. Qualitative, it's there or not without that 2,000 to 3,000 X magnification versus, hey, we can get the DNA fragments and pick it up and be far more sensitive and not have to worry about missing it because of those fragments are being there, if you will.
And gastroenterologists, I've had a few, and some of them could be watching, they'll actually poo-poo that. And they'll say, oh, GI map, it's too sensitive. And I'll go, here's the deal. We found it. Like, maybe it is a small amount of Giardia, but here's the deal. That's enough of the tip of the iceberg for me to go, I'm going to use herbs. Guess what? They feel better. Yeah. So I'm going for the results. Like, the lab is not the end thing for us. Yeah. It's just the tool to help us go in the right direction. And then we test it. Yeah. And if you give them the anti-parasitic herbs and they go, oh my God, I feel better. I'm less tired. I have no anxiety. I have no depression, and my skin's better. To me, that test was valuable. So this idea, like, it's too sensitive, I don't know. I don't understand that.
Did you just say the GI docs will poo-poo the stool test? Seriously?
Exactly.
I'm 40. I'm pulling out the dad jokes now. Okay.
I love it. So the last thing I will touch on is you guys obviously geek out on a lot of the stuff on nutrition. What is your diet like? And I'm the same way as you. I do still like vegetables. Vegetables have come under fire lately for plant defense chemicals, mostly by Saladino and other people in the carnivore crowd. What do you think about that, for one? Because I think we all in here would recognize plant defense chemicals are real. You're never going to tell anybody to eat a bunch of raw kale, do a bunch of raw broccoli. I definitely don't think that's any advice that any of us would give. What is your diet like? Why do you include some vegetables, some tubers, even some grain here and there? What is your diet like? Let's run through that.
Great question. So cooking does increase the bioavailability of nutrition. Even the USDA, our own government, will say, you have broccoli raw, you steam it, the nutritional count goes up. So even our government acknowledges that. So one, you deactivate anti-nutrients, right? Phytates, oxalates, right? You decrease some of these, compounds that make it harder to break down protein, trypsin inhibitors, right? And so you get more of those bioavailable nutrients. Now, if you have a lot of gut issues, we can throw it in an Instapot, right? We can cook it down better, right? We can choose foods that are lower in FODMAP or lower naturally in salicylates and phenols and oxalates, right? So getting back to mine, so we can find a way to make that work, right? People that have severe autoimmune issues, right? You can go look at Jordan Peterson. He's a major hip degenerative condition where he cannot eat any vegetables because it literally creates antibodies to his bone, right? People like that, they have to be like super more carnivore, right? People like us, we can find that balance, and starchy tubers tend to be a good option as well because you're getting that starch. Most people get it from grains. So we're decreasing the gluten. So myself, I like a good high quality organic coffee in the morning. I do up to a tablespoon of MCT oil, 20 grams of collagen peptides, and I'll do a little bit of grass-fed butter. I feel amazing with that. My lunch, like keeping simple on the go lunches, you can do 1 to 2 really good skipjack tuna, right? 2 cans of it. That's going to have a high selenium to mercury ratio. So selenium naturally chelates out mercury. So if you're worried about mercury in fish, just choose high selenium to low mercury. I'll use like avocado mayo on there. I'll get maybe a little bit of shredded kale in there or shredded carrots, mix it in, and that's amazing. So that's my easy lunch. And then dinner can be like a steak, some steamed broccoli, and then maybe a little bit of sweet potato or a starch. I try to have my carbs more at night. I try to go with that carb backloading principle.
I do that too.
And be lower carb during the day. Try to get 15,000 steps. I do notice the older I get, the more naturally insulin resistant I get, where I need 15,000 steps and I need a little bit of either Tabata or zone 2 or a little bit of resistance training to keep my muscles more insulin sensitive.
For sure. And then I'll walk through what I typically eat in a day, then we'll get to you, Evan. So my day usually looks like I wake up and I have bone broth. As you guys know, it's a little cold here in the morning still, which I kind of like bone broth when it's cold. So I'm waking up doing bone broth. Oftentimes I'll do a protein shake or some eggs with some cheddar cheese in there. And then because it's about 60 to 90 minutes after I'm awake there. And first thing when I hydrate in the morning, it's just electrolytes and water and then the bone broth. And then I have some protein, do that protein shake or eggs. And then I'll have my coffee, just a little splash of cold brew, some grass-fed dairy, something like that. And then lunch is very similar. I'm just doing like greens and protein usually. So maybe steak salad, something like that, some chicken. I don't, maybe a little bit of fruit before my workout. And then dinner, very similar to you, where I'll have some meat, fish, something like that. And then some sweet potatoes. That's when I get a little fancier with it. Might have a bigger meal then. And I am doing the carbohydrate backloading. So we should touch on that quickly. During the day, I'm really not eating that much in terms of carbohydrates. I might have some fruit. I might have some, potatoes at lunch sometimes if I'm training more. What is carbohydrate backloading, and why do we both like eating sometimes when I'm training hard, as many carbs I kind of want in the evening. Like I'm potatoes, and in my yogurt bowl, I don't mind putting a good amount of honey in there, but only at night. Why is that?
So there's a couple of theories. So first theory is number 1 is we have more cortisol during the day based on that circadian rhythm. So more cortisol in the morning and then tapering down through the afternoon. So that automatically mobilizes more glucose. So why do we want carbohydrate that breaks down into more glucose when we already have it naturally based on our hormones?
Yes.
So it's burning the glucose that's already there due to our natural hormonal rhythm. All right. Number 2, you can have some deviations if you work out. Like if you work out, insulin does allow glucose into the cell and can convert it to fat if we don't have room for it, right? Store as glycogen, but it can also increase HGH, right? And so that can increase growth hormone and be more anabolic post-workout. So if you're working out in the morning, we may make an exception.
For sure.
If you're working out at night, definitely at night. And there's going to be some theory because now cortisol is lower, we're more insulin sensitive at night. And plus, getting more of that insulin bump at night can also improve sleep as well, which does get a growth hormone bump from the sleep side of the fence. So it's that there's some studies showing a better free fatty acid body mass, lower free fatty acid in the body mass by timing it more up. There's a famous firefighter study where they took all the calories of carbs, spread it out evenly, or did it all at night, and the night group had a better fat loss.
Yeah, totally.
It seems like the sleep's better too when I do starch at night for some reason. I don't know the mechanism.
It's
there.
the insulin. You need insulin to get those amino acids across the blood-brain barrier. So the 5-HTP, the tryptophan, the insulin opens the gates in the brain.
Now, I want to put a little note, interject a note into here, which is like most people, this is like geeky advanced nutritional therapy. Just if you're not to the point of like just eating real food,
100%, yeah.
Let's get you there
That's
first.
the first step. Eating real food, getting, find your target body weight and try to get a gram of protein per that pound of body weight.
Because I worry, like if I'm an outsider, I worry that if we go so deep and geeky into the carb timing, then someone's like, they're hitting, what was the Bugles? Was it Bugles?
Yeah, cookie.
Yeah,
well,
cookie.
Look, my audience is a lot of them are geeky. A lot of people are past that, I am eating real food. I am eating grass-fed steak. Right. I'm eating fruits and vegetables. So they want to know little things that can help them. And like for so many people when they're trying to lose weight, like of course you can do your calorie tracking and eat real food. And if you're in a calorie deficit, most likely you're going to start shedding the pounds. But a lot of people, it's just tough for them to count all that stuff. And like with so many people, I tell them, if you're going to hit your protein goal and you're just going to eat proteins and healthy fats during the day, and then at night you start to have some of those carbohydrates to refuel from your workout, guess what starts happening? They start losing weight. When you're eating real food, it is very hard to exist in this crazy calorie surplus that many people create.
Yeah.
But when you do stuff like Cookie King just did, where you, boom, big gulp and bugles, like you're able to create this calorie surplus very easily.
Yes.
It just hijacks the reward system, and it's where so many people are at today. So
I'll hit on oxalates real quick.
Yeah.
And I
go
think
ahead.
I think I may have hit this. I did Paul Saladino's podcast maybe 2 years back, and we talked about mold. And then I remember there was some interview with a woman who was like, the oxalate queen or something, like where oxalates were just so demonized in the diet, right? But here's the reality about oxalates, and this is based on thousands and thousands of organic acids. Okay, this is not just like I read something on kale and I'm just like oxalates are the devil. Here's the deal: Candida and/or mold drive up oxalates
Bingo.
10x more than dietary oxalates. It's very, very rare that I'm concerned that someone is eating a level of oxalates in the diet enough to drive up the levels off the chart on the organic acids test. So when we see the levels on the oat test, okay, we're measuring oxalic acid there. All we do, we've had some people where they're literally doing green smoothies. Now, I don't recommend that. I don't typically, personally, I don't eat any raw leafy greens. I don't feel well with them. But I've seen people that were doing green smoothies. And they're like, is that a problem? I'm like, well, maybe, but how about we just use herbal antifungals? Let's get this candida and mold under control.
Yes.
And here's the crazy thing. On the retest, oxalates were perfectly normal. So this idea now where we've completely demonized a certain food or food group because of the potential oxalates in it, it is totally overblown. And that's based on lab data that's incredible to see. Just an antifungal knocks the oxalates down.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of people that are just in this space have wondered if Saladino might have just a pretty sensitive, like, autoimmune type thing, which I completely understand. I've been there at different times in my life. And then he's saying, hey, you shouldn't eat vegetables because of the plant defense chemicals. Because when I eat them, like, he has all these issues when he eats them.
Yeah, and that's the hard part. And like we've had fun. I've had good conversations with Paul. I think he's an awesome guy. I think he's got great
we love
intention.
Paul.
But here's the thing: the problem is marketing. In social media, people are kind of finding their tribe, and the problem is a lot of people's brands are N equals 1, right? And so if you take that N equals 1 and you extrapolate that to 2, 5, 10 million followers, then everyone thinks, oh, he has oxalate issues. I'm going to have oxalate issues. Therefore, I'm going to completely avoid sweet potatoes, which I think is an incredible, amazing food source. And you all made some amazing sweet potatoes there. So I don't want people to get
sometimes
afraid.
when I make, like, I'm showing what I eat today, people still to this day, because I do eat a lot of animal-based meals. I'm a fan of the whole animal-based thing, and I went, viral in that space. People will sometimes be astonished when I'm making a beef stew and I'm putting celery and carrots in there.
Yeah.
And there's always jokes. The jokes are funny. The plant defense chemical jokes are funny. But yeah, so you're not afraid of those necessarily when they're properly prepared. And so what does, like, an average day of eating look like for you?
Yeah, the only thing different that you guys are doing that I'm not is fish. I typically don't mess with fish. I find it's hard to get a fish that's low enough in histamine for me to feel good with it.
Yeah, you're histamine sensitive for sure.
Yeah. So, just based on me having previous mold exposure, I'm more sensitive to the dietary histamine. So I generally slant lower histamine diet. So like pineapple, it's very high histamine. Years ago, avocado was high histamine. That used to be an issue. So if you notice you have headaches or migraines from avocado, you may consider looking at a low histamine. I have a free low histamine guide that we can give to people where they can look at the low and high histamine foods. And you may find that you need to shift a little bit lower histamine, especially if you've had an issue with headaches, migraines, if you get sick in the car. So roads are curvy up in here. If you're car sick after 20, 30 minutes, that is likely a histamine problem, potentially related to bacteria.
I feel like I have, like, moderate histamine issues, and we're fixing my gut with some of the Dr. J stuff that I'm doing right now. And so, like, like, after reading some of those high histamine foods, I try to keep it, like, a bit more moderate, but totally, and then that's the thing, guys. Find what works for you. There are general principles. There's no way you're going to be fully healthy eating these crazy processed foods that I talk about so much, but, like, you have to find your own thing for sure. So
I'm doing mainly land animals. So typical breakfast. I've got 3 kids, so we try to get them well fed before school.
Yep.
Behavior wise, movement,
huge
energy
difference.
wise.
Huge difference for kids.
So usually it's going to be pasture raised eggs. It's going to be grass fed butter, and then we'll try to do either like a pastured pork sausage. We'll do a pastured beef sausage if we can get it. Sometimes it's a burger. My oldest, she'll literally know how good she feels. Daddy, can I have a burger for breakfast?
Yep.
I get goosebumps talking about it. Absolutely, you can have you can have a burger for breakfast,
Yes.
sweetie. Or we'll do a grass-fed beef protein smoothie,
Yep.
and then I like to mix it just for the consistency. You know how collagen rich the grass-fed beef is, so we'll actually do 1 scoop of grass-fed whey and then 1 scoop of grass-fed beef.
Oh, I've been loving mixing the whey and
the
beef. I
combo
do that a lot,
is amazing. So that's breakfast, and then a lot of times it's raspberries, and my daughter will eat the entire $9 container of organic raspberries.
Same problem with me, man.
In
It's
one sitting.
nuts. It's a real problem.
So then and Honey Mamas. I love Honey
Oh,
Mamas.
I love Honey Mamas
Yeah.
chocolate,
So
yeah.
shout out to them.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So we'll send the kids to school with a strip of Honey Mamas.
Nice.
And then lunch is usually going to be, just because it's quick, we got to hurry up between clients. Usually it's going to be either a steak that I have cut thin so I can cook it real hot and real fast.
Yep.
2 minutes each side. Sea salt, Celtic salt,
Love
done.
that.
So it could, depending on the day, it could be literally steak and a handful of blueberries, and that's lunch. And then dinner, usually I try to make it a little more interesting so the kids are not bored. So we might bring in like almond flour tortillas. We might do cassava flour tortillas, just so they feel like they have a somewhat normal dinner.
Yeah.
And then we're going to do grass-fed ground beef. I do a lot of bison. I do elk meat. I had a friend who shot on elk. He sent me so much elk meat.
Wow.
Oh my God, elk is amazing.
It is.
We'll do venison if I have access, or if I've been able, be successful in the hunt. We'll do venison sausage. Sometimes we'll actually do a little bit of the cheddar cheese with the venison. That's like a fun treat for the kids. And then for treats too, like if you have kids watching, I think it's fine if you're gonna do like some paleo pancakes.
Totally.
You might have some tiger nut flour, something like that. Maple syrup, I have no issue with. There's also this fear of sugar, this fear of honey.
I do honey. I do maple syrup.
The syrup is fine. It's
And the key with the syrup, have your kids dip it versus drench it, because the pancakes will absorb all of it. You won't
Oh,
even
and
taste
they'll
it.
put as much
You
as
just
they want.
you just dip. You'll knock it down to 80%.
Yeah.
Easily.
And then a snack. I mean, I'll do a small amount of organic macadamias.
Yeah.
Just a handful of macadamias goes a long way. I mean, I forget what the exact portion is, but a small handful could be like 20 grams of fat.
Yeah, and that's a good just reminder of the plant defense chemical thing. There's definitely something real with it. When we were manufacturing a trail mix, dude, I was eating so much trail mix, and I got some of those symptoms, probably some from phytic acid from the nuts. But if I have a small amount, I don't get that. It's pretty simple stuff.
And a lot of times when people, let's say, create content out there, a lot of content creators aren't in the field clinically. And so they have a good experience changing their diet, and they feel better on this thing. And so this is the thing that everyone should do. And it's like a handyman that goes to a house, has a great experience helping a customer with the Phillips head screwdriver and a hammer. And they go to the next home being like, these are my tools. I've had success. I've made money. And it's like, well, now you need a miter saw and something else, right? It's like, okay, well, you have the wrong tool. So you got to know, like, talk about oxalates. I'm trying to get my people just to eat some green vegetables.
Yeah.
And worrying about oxalates is another level of worry they can't handle. So it's like, okay, do we have a history of kidney stones? Do we have a history of weird joint pain? Do we have a history of vulvodynia, vaginal pain?
And then you might go low oxalate.
Then it may make sense because their case history calls for it, right?
Yeah. So guys, Dr. J's got to get to the airport. So we just crushed a bunch of content for you guys over the last couple of days. I hope you've been loving this. Send this to anybody that's having some health issues. And again, if you want to really dial in your health, I would recommend saving up a little bit of money. It's not a lot of money. Getting some lab testing done, figuring out what's going on with your body with GI map, with organic acids, with hormones, minerals, neurotransmitters, all the stuff that you can find out. And then dial in your nutrition, first of all, and movement, dial in your supplements and sleep, all that, and you'll feel amazing.
Amen.
So, I appreciate you guys. Justin Health, Evan Brand, look them up, work with them. Love you guys.
Take care.